let it
just
go.
do it. Just let it go. Let it
Let it go.
go. Yeah.
Can't
And then
hold
when we go live, you'll tell us
back.
and we'll be ready for it.
Yeah.
we went live about 10 seconds ago.
Oh my gosh. Oh, hi everyone. Hi.
Hello. Welcome.
The Unready room, as usual, is
Yes. We're keeping on brand.
Keeping on brand, yes.
keeping on brand. D?
Brand.
No, that doesn't.
That
D.
too.
Yeah, we're keeping on brand, so we're regular.
Yeah. Yeah, I really loved it when my sisters called me all brand. I was just like,
Oh, lovely.
no.
Well, I
no,
like
thank
your
you.
name today, though. Bran.
Thank you.
That's pretty
Thank you.
good. Yeah,
Thank you.
excellent.
I thought of it myself. Sometimes I ask
Couldn't
Dave for
tell.
help, but today I thought of it myself.
Excellent. Well, this is, like we said, the Unready Room. We're live talking about the Voyager 2-part episode, Year of Hell. Hopefully, all of you in the chat have watched this fairly recently and are caught up with us. We, of course, have watched this many times in the past. Oh, but maybe not. Maybe that's not the case for all of us.
Oh, thanks. Let's get it out of the way already. Okay. So in my state, UPN was constantly interrupting, preempting, etc. Voyager from about the middle of season 3 through the end of its run on television. So I have never seen Year of Hell before.
That's so exciting to me. I love that you have not seen this before, watching it for this. So that is so cool.
It gives us a whole new perspective from your angle as a first timer, where we've seen it many times. And so this is really going to be interesting for sure.
Okay. Let's keep that in mind.
Yes.
No shaming from the chat. Thank you.
Absolutely not. No.
And I started to wonder earlier today too, was this episode chosen because it reflects what we're going through now? Because I consider 2020 right now the year of hell.
It feels like it, doesn't it?
Yeah. I expressed that sentiment on Twitter. Yes.
Yeah, I retweeted that sentiment on Twitter.
Wow. I need to be on Twitter more.
Gosh,
really, if you want 2020 to be less of a year of hell, maybe I wouldn't recommend going on Twitter more, but
that's why
your mileage may vary.
It just depends on who you're following. Like, Swear Trek, Trekcore, those are pretty safe. So.
Yeah.
I love Swear Trek. It makes my day every day.
Absolutely. Year of Hell. So those of you who don't know, this is the 2-parter from season 4, which takes place over the course of a year. Big hint in the title there. And Voyager progressively getting its butt kicked by the Krenim. And there's this big Krenim temporal weapon ship that's erasing species and things from history, constantly altering the flow of time. And Voyager ends up in its path because they develop temporal shielding to protect against these chronoton torpedoes and become an anomalous element that throws the main villain's plans out of whack. And the main villain is Anorax, played by Kurtwood Smith. So why don't we start with Anorax? Because the villains, the antagonists on the television shows tend not to get a lot of the development, I think, that this character got in these episodes.
Agreed.
So yeah, let's start with that. So Brandi, as a newcomer, I'm going to keep doing this. I apologize.
No, don't apologize. I'm good. I'm good.
What are your first kind of impressions of Anorax? What do you think of this character?
Well, it seemed to me, first of all, again, hadn't seen these episodes before. It seemed to me like he'd been at this for a long time, long time, was very calm and controlled most of the time, but I felt like there was something else that was nagging at him, and that became clearer to me, very early on. Like, oh, he lost somebody, I'm guessing wife. And so, because he keeps asking, did this colony get reconstituted? And it never did. And so they were off to try it again. And I just thought, okay, so this guy really honestly thinks he's doing the right thing, but what exactly is he really doing this for? And as it turns out later, it's all about restoring the empire and getting his wife back. Mostly getting his wife back. But
Mhm.
because they had that first one is like 98%. 98%.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
because that one colony hadn't been reconstituted, wasn't good enough. And I'm like, okay, this guy is obsessed.
Yeah.
So he very early on presents that. He also seems like a very reasonable person on the outside, but his motivations are anything but.
Mhm.
So complicated. And the
Yeah.
kind of person that you're like, he doesn't seem like an evil person. He just seems misguided and hurt, which he was.
Yeah, there's
You
those
find out.
little shades of regret, I guess. You like there's very subtle acting by Kurtwood Smith here where
So
like
good.
just before he fires the weapon, he's like fire, like
Mhm.
that hesitation, that little bit of there's something there that he regrets this, but not enough to obviously not push forward and believe that his cause is just, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is when you find out that, oh, that wasn't even their space to begin with. They were invaders. They conquered the area and took over everything and spreading their empire far and wide. And then the actual originators of that planet came back and it's like, no, bye. And fought them off and won. And it was back to being Zol space. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's very forgive me. I don't want to alienate anyone, but it just seems so Republican. just just seems so Republican. It's like back to the glory days when we oppressed everyone. Yeah, it's kind of what it
Indeed.
feels like.
Bruce,
Interesting.
thoughts?
So yeah, the whole 98% thing really does bother me because he is so close to perfection, so close. It's going to be hard to get even closer than that. And yet it's not good enough because he doesn't have his family. They're not part of that 98%. His colony wasn't. And it's sad because you would think at that point he would understand that even if his goal is to bring their empire back and to correct the timeline to work in their favor, he has to realize he's being so selfish to the point that it's now more about what he wants and not what his people want. I mean, what his people want is selfish enough, but then he's got to realize that he's even being more selfish about himself than the people that he's representing. And so when they go back and they're making more alterations to the timeline and changing things, I think they got to that one point where it was 52 or 53%. And I had a feeling that had they said his colony would survive, that they were now there, he would stop.
Mhm.
And he's willing to stop at 50% of getting to where they need to go, but not at 98% because it's only about what his family. Because if his family had appeared earlier at the 52%, he wouldn't risk trying to change it again because they could be gone the
Absolutely.
next time. So it was very selfish of him. And I really wish his crew would have called him on that and stopped him long before, as
Yeah,
far as he
because
went into things. Yeah.
they'd
Mhm.
been at that for 200 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
200 years. That is not, completing the mission. That's obsession.
Yeah. Which is interesting too, because if you think about it, they've been at it for 200 years. Even if he restored the colony in that history, he'd be restoring his wife's life, but like she would have been long dead because she lived back at that time. And we know their lifespans aren't normally that long. It's just that, they're preserved on this ship that exists outside of time. The universe keeps flowing around them, but they're not aging, kind of thing, because Obrist says that he's celebrating the birthdays of people long dead, his brother and his family and things like that. So,
Yeah.
it's interesting that, you know, it's selfish, of course. He wants that colony back, but he's not even going to be able to experience having her back. It's just the knowledge that she did live, basically. It's interesting.
But if he does get her back, can't they just come out of their temporal isolation and join with that timeline?
That's what I was
Maybe.
wondering too.
Yeah,
I
they're
assume
not really
so.
clear on that.
Yeah,
That's
because I mean,
what
if you're 200 years past and you're not, even if you get to establishing his colony back into the timeline, he doesn't know what he's going to get. Yeah, his wife is long gone. He might have grandchildren, great grandchildren, or maybe not, because he wasn't there to even make children with her. I don't even know if they had children before this.
Mhm.
He talked as if they didn't have children. It was a possible future that he wanted to have with her of children and grandchildren.
Well,
Hmm.
he did say he wanted his family back, so
Yeah,
not just
I
his
assume-
wife. So I'm assuming he had children.
That's what I assumed too. That's kind of what I got. It's definitely open to interpretation, though, for sure.
That is true. That is true.
Mhm.
It's never confirmed outright.
He reminds me of Soren from Generations.
Yes,
Yeah,
except
I can see that.
slightly less insane,
Yes,
but only
Mhm.
slightly.
Yeah.
Same
Yeah.
obsession, but not as, what's the
Mhm.
word I'm looking for here? Not as straight up crazy in that regard.
Yep. And Paul
Yeah.
Burroughs just said Generations too.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. I like that. So yeah, he says Soren in Generations was obsessed about the Nexus because he was happy and could live on. However, in the novel, it was very much more about getting his family back, a more understandable obsession. So a little bit more in line with what Anorax is kind of after here.
Yeah.
So interesting. That's cool.
Yeah.
So one interesting thing about this episode as well, this two-parter, is it's actually a sequel to a previous Voyager episode where all of this was mentioned. And that's from the previous season, the episode Before and After. And a few people have mentioned this in the chat as well, where Kes experiences her life in reverse. And one part of that life is the year of hell. And there's some interesting little things that kind of cross over with that. So the Chronoton torpedo that 7 of 9 is trying to get the temporal variance of, Kes is doing that in that episode because that's what caused her to start going back in time due to this experiment that the Doctor was doing in the far future. It's all very complicated. But that torpedo's on the same deck with the same temporal variance. The only difference, of course, is Kes isn't there because she was written out of the show by that point, which is interesting. The other interesting thing is rewatching Before and After, the end of that episode, the way that episode ends is, you know, Kes is telling Janeway about her experiences, and Janeway says something like, I look forward to reading your report. I'm especially interested to hear everything that you know about these Krenim and their torpedoes. So what happened? Because Voyager here doesn't seem to know anything about them at this point. I always thought that was a little mistake that could be maybe explained away, but it always struck me as odd because it was so explicit in that script. And in this one, Tuvok's like, their torpedoes seem to exist outside of, you know, Kes knew all about that. So.
Mistakes in
What-
Voyager?
Well,
Weird.
this is how I look at it, because when we see the temporal wave hit Voyager the first time, their past is suddenly different as far as how they got to that point. So I'm assuming that because this future did not have Kes in it, that kind of rewrote the past in that regard. That's the way I look at it.
Could be, yes.
I can buy that. So up until that first wave hit them, they had knowledge of the Krenim and their torpedoes, but that could have wiped it out. I buy that. I'm suddenly okay with all of that.
I buy it 100%. Boom.
I'm happy to help. Here
I
to
love it.
rationalize things that seem unrationalizable.
Wait, what are you drinking there? Diet?
Diet cherry vanilla Dr.
Diet-
Pepper. It's
okay,
my drink of choice.
That's
You
your
know that.
drink. Yes. I need to get some. I've had it, but I haven't had it in a while.
I love it.
Nice. Excellent. So I cannot remember what I was going to say about the next little bit. But so anyway, we'll put that aside for now. That first wave hitting them, I always thought was a really interesting moment because I remember first watching this and I wasn't sure what happened exactly. And then you kind of piece it together. So I'm curious, Brandi, when you watch this, I mean, I was a lot younger, so I was kind of like, what's going on? Maybe you got it a lot better than me. That initially, and Brandi's back.
Yes. Sorry. It's windy again today, so that's fun.
Awesome. So yeah, that first initial wave hit and everything changes around them. Suddenly there's a dead ensign on the floor, and
Mm-hmm.
none of the crew reacts to the changes because of course they've changed along with it. So what was your kind of impression of that moment, and like what did you kind of get immediately what had happened? Or
Oh yes, I understood immediately what had happened because I've seen Star Trek: The Next Generation. So,
fair enough.
remember Enterprise C coming through? Or was it
Yeah,
the B? B or
it's the
C?
C.
Sorry, I
C.
forget.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then suddenly their entire history is different and they're wearing different uniforms. And it seems like nothing has happened to them. But we as the viewer are going, what? So, no, I understood exactly what was going on immediately.
Speaking
that's
of
cool.
uniforms,
Connection there. That's cool.
that's one of my favorite parts in this, is seeing Neelix in a Starfleet uniform.
Yes, I do enjoy that very much.
I
Yeah.
have that written to talk about because it seems like every time we see an alternate future on Voyager, Neelix becomes a security officer, and the only time he doesn't is like the actual timeline. He just never does. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know what
Hey.
more to say about it than that, but
I don't know. Does he outrank Harry?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, did Harry
Oh,
finally
no.
get promoted and it all got wiped away? Was he a
Probably.
lieutenant? Was he? Somebody tell me, was he wearing lieutenant bibs? I wasn't paying
Oh.
attention.
See, I'm
I don't-
seeing people mention that in the comments, and I didn't catch that if that's the case.
I didn't catch it either. Now I want to go back and look.
I did notice that Neelix had a single ensign pip. So,
Field commission.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, well, that's a funny thing because Tom Paris gets field commission right up to lieutenant in the first freaking episode, and Harry Kim stays an ensign for 7 years.
Mm-hmm. And Tom Paris even gets demoted to ensign and then back up to lieutenant in that time as well. Like,
not cool, man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
poor Harry.
But you know what? I was thinking about it because Dan and I, excuse me, we're reading a Voyager novel for an upcoming, that show, literary treks. And I noted there was various ensigns in the book, and I thought, I'm always thinking about how it's a shame Harry never got promoted out of being an ensign to a lieutenant. But I'm thinking, that would be the same for all probably these other ensigns too. There's a bunch of ensigns that are waiting 7 years for a promotion, or they all got promoted except for Harry.
Aww.
Which I don't think would have happened.
That would be bad. That would be extra bad.
Yeah.
Now I kind of wanted an extra scene where Harry calls Neelix sir. Just because that would be incredibly cruel. I love it.
I'm trying to Google to see if I can find an image of Harry as a lieutenant in this episode, but I can't find anything. I have to go back and watch.
Especially towards the end when there's only 7 people left on the ship, and he's still got to be an ensign.
Well, if he is lieutenant in Year of Hell, if you guys really did see this, around what time? Was it in part 2, part 1? Like, where was this?
Yeah, I want to know. Because honestly, okay, yeah, I haven't seen the whole show, but I have met Garrett Wang. I love him to pieces. And I was always actually quite partial to Harry Kim. So I don't get what all the hate's about.
Yeah. I always had a bit of a special affinity for Harry Kim as well. I mean, he's an only child. I kind of felt that kind of connection with him a little bit. And I don't know, at that point in my life when I was watching it, I felt like I was the young person with older people all around me kind of thing. So, I felt that kind of connection there. So I've always liked Harry, and it bugs me when he gets picked on a bit by the writers and etc.
Well, that's the thing. It's not his fault that the writers didn't give him good things to do or good lines or anything like that, because honestly, I think they could have given Garrett Wang a lot more leeway and a lot more character development, and they just didn't care. And I guess that's what happens when you have 9 people in your ensemble. But at the same time, you know, I love Harry. I'm not going to apologize for it either.
No, of course not. Absolutely not.
I think it would have been funny. You and Chakotay had the little pocket watch thing, and he gave it to Janeway, and Janeway it would have been great if she would hand it back. She says, "We need all the materials that we can save in this ship. We can use this to make a pip for Harry."
Or even worse, she takes the pocket watch and says, we need all the materials. Oh, Harry. There we go. We don't need that anymore.
Right.
Oh. Okay, now we're making fun of Harry. That's
okay, so cool. I saw somewhere someone said it's before and after that episode is mentioned he's a lieutenant. Is that
Yes.
That
yes,
I knew
that
for sure.
Correct.
Right. Yeah. But so it's not in Year of Hell then.
Oh, so it doesn't happen in Year of Hell as well. Okay. That's cool. Good to know.
Thanks, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you. Very much appreciated. So another aspect of this episode that gets a lot of attention among certain people, and unfortunately Suzanne isn't here to talk about this aspect, but the Janeway Chakotay relationship and their kind of, especially in part 1, obviously, because Chakotay is on Anorax's ship for part 2, but there's a little bit of fuel for the JCer shippers there a little bit. I think I like them in this episode.
Agree. Agree. I always thought it was weird that suddenly he went off and started dating 7 of 9. I'm just like, wait, when did this happen? Because that was one of those times where it was preempted, and suddenly I'm able to actually see an episode again. It's like, what is this? What did I how dating? Oh,
we all missed it.
Yeah, I mean, at least that's only in the final episode that they're actually
but it's just kind of like there was no build up to that whatsoever, and just no.
It's kind of just like a funny aside is at the time that it happened, somebody pointed out that like Star Trek series seem to always have like in the final season some weird pairing that came out of nowhere. And they were like, okay, so TNG had Worf and Troy. Deep Space Nine had Julian and Ezri in the final episode. Voyager has 7 and Chakotay now. And then they even said, like, even Star Trek 5, all of a sudden Scotty and Uhura seem to be it's like towards the end of their runs. They just, anyway, that's a total aside. But I remember that like Facebook comment or whatever it was.
Yeah. I remember noticing that, thinking that, because one time I was watching All Good Things and seeing Worf and Troy, I was like, hey, it's like in Voyager. Hey, wait. I started thinking that,
And again, Worf and Troy didn't actually date in like real life in the show until the final episode. So it's kind of weird. I don't know why they do that.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird.
Who's going to be dating at Discovery, Brandi? At the end of the last episode of Discovery, who's going to be dating?
Tilly and Reese are finally going to get together. He's finally going to get that kiss that he's been aiming for since Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad.
I just watched that episode last weekend, and I forgot that moment. I was like, oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, she was going through a musician phase, but then she was going back into a soldier phase. So I'm just saying, you never know.
Patrick, absolutely agree. There was an actual foundation with Worf and Troy and a build up rather than 7 and Chakotay. But anyway.
I still didn't like it.
Which is your prerogative.
Yeah, it felt wrong to me. But that's just me.
Yeah, absolutely. So we alluded to it. So Chakotay remembers Janeway's birthday, and he's been saving this watch and tells her the story of oh my goodness, it's escaped my head, and it's the one thing I didn't write down.
Oh no.
what's the ship and the
Oh my gosh.
wow.
Oh,
I don't
gosh.
remember either.
I've actually taught history, and this is bad. But
Oh,
anyway,
no.
It happens.
It's gone
It's
out of
called
my
a
head.
brain fart, and it happens.
Yeah,
But that one ship.
It's a ship, Dan. It's
it's
yeah,
that ship.
it's that
Yeah,
ship.
that ship. Anyway,
I'll look it up. You guys go ahead
I'm
and
trying to
talk.
look
I'll
it up. I can't find it.
we're just doing our best to live up to the Unready Room name here.
Yes,
Yep.
we're so
We are
unready.
on brand, like I said.
Definitely. But yeah, so I love that scene. And, you know, as harsh as Janeway is, I liked her line too when she said, you know, that watch represents a meal, a pair of boots. That could be the difference between life and death. But at the same time, I also like that we find out in part 2 that Chakotay disobeyed that order and kept it for her. So, you know.
Which I thought that he would do. I was not
Mhm.
surprised at that at all. Because when she's like leafing through stuff and they were like, "Oh, Chakotay's quarters," oh, that watch is gonna be in there.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then of course she wears it for the rest of the episode on her pants there. So, you know, very symbolic and very lovely, of course.
Yeah, and that was like a huge watch, you guys. I
Mhm.
mean, I've had many pocket watches, and that was huge. But then they
Yeah.
were huge back in the old-timey days.
Yeah,
They
but
needed a lot of really
Chakotay
good
built
stuff.
that, you know. So he's
He
been working on it for a while.
replicated it.
Yes.
Now, when you said he built it, I just pictured him pulling like a Cisco, like building it. It's a watch instead of. But my brain goes to weird places. So,
Sorry.
oh man.
It was
Um,
good times. Good times.
So something that we alluded to when we started talking was actually was that might have been before we started recording. Sorry, we were talking about.
See, that's why you
there's
should
a-
talk before the show.
There's a recent interview with Brian Fuller on the podcast where he talks about the original idea in the writers' room was that this would be an entire season. This would be the Year of Hell season. And watching this episode, you know, I kind of, with that in mind, was thinking about how it would play out over a whole season. And one thing I mentioned to you guys before we started recording was the kind of parallels I hadn't thought of before between this and like the Xindi arc season in Enterprise. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, wow, the ship gets trashed. You know, a lot of crew members are killed, and there's a huge super weapon that they have to destroy. There's a lot of interesting parallels that I hadn't thought of before.
Yeah, there are. Because the NX-01 sure takes a hell of a beating in season 3 in more than one episode. But I mean, damage. That one hurts me a lot. So much, really. So, and I've experienced similar feelings while watching Voyager fall to pieces over the course of this 2-parter, to the point where it was breaking my heart to see our girl just, you know, barely being held together by spit and prayers, you know.
Mm.
It was hard. It was just, it's I'm just an emotional person, which I have said before, and I can unfortunately very easily empathize with those people, even though they're not real people. Their performances create a reality in which
Mhm.
I can exist temporarily and empathize with what they're going through. And I feel for that poor ship. But yeah, and just this constant fighting, constant problems. And that happened a lot in the Xindi arc as well. Just always seeming to be one step behind, always seeming to get where they're going just a little bit too late and miss what they need to do or who they need to talk to, or, you know, there are a lot of similarities there without being a straight up rip off
Mhm.
of each
Absolutely.
other. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. You know, So yeah, as I was watching these two episodes, I was thinking, okay, what if this was a full season? And originally, when I was thinking about it before watching this again, I thought, yeah, I would have loved to have seen Year of Hell as a full season. But as of now, I don't think I would, at least not everything that's going on in the storyline. I mean, I don't know if I'd want it stretched to a full season, but what I would like to have seen is what we were experiencing through these two episodes, and that is Voyager and the crew just not resetting all the time. That, it's just things just keep getting worse and things aren't always working, and the ship may be damaged for months. I'd love to see that the ship is damaged maybe for several episodes before it got repaired, or maybe the holodeck doesn't work for a season, or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
The fact that this just isn't easy. It's not, the ship looks perfect and is running great and everything's fine and we're just trying to get home. Just that struggle through the 7 seasons would have been great, to just seeing that they're just limping along and they're doing everything they can, everything possible to get through it all and all these tough times. And the only thing that's keeping them together is the family they've created among themselves. And that struggle throughout really would have, I mean, there's some of that, but it really would stand out if the stakes were really higher.
Yeah, so not a direct, like, serialized story told over, whatever, but the larger mission of them trying to get home having consequences that carry on through the episodes more so than we got on screen, I think would be excellent.
Yeah.
I think one of the benefits of them having originally planned this as a full season, and obviously not written a whole bunch of scripts or anything, but kind of done like a broad plan for what they wanted to do, is what that means is we got 2 very good episodes. Because watching this with that in mind, my mind kept going like, oh, I think they took the absolute best ideas that they had put together and focused on those in these 2 episodes. And as much fun, I don't know, as good as it might have been to see that play out over a whole season, the fact that these episodes are as good as they are, I think, is kind of because of all that planning that went into it. So for example, Mossy G's comment here, it was hard watching the doctor close the hatch on those 2 crew members. I could see that being an episode where the doctor wrestles with having made that decision. Maybe even some of the seeds of that are what we see later in Latent Image, when he has to wrestle with the idea that he saved Harry Kim's life over the other crew member's life. And, maybe that even got used in there a bit. But like all of these kind of showcase moments in these 2 episodes, I feel like you could build an episode, a story around those moments, and they would be pretty good. Put together in these 2 episodes, they're excellent and really great. And sometimes I do wish we lingered on them a little bit more, but at the same time, the story does as a whole work really well.
Yeah, that was one of the scenes that made me cry.
Yeah.
Not just because of him shutting that hatch, but then the immediate outside shot, exterior shot of that whole deck just blowing halfway around. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
oh.
Well, yeah, to your point, Dan, I mean, if this was, pulled out to something longer, if they played this concept out for a full season, even I could definitely see that being an episode, like you're saying. But even that it continues to play out, maybe for a few more episodes, the doctor's still struggling with that over time, and maybe he faces that type of situation again later in a later episode. And you just keep adding these experiences to these characters and getting them to a point that they have to, things aren't wrapped up in an episode. These are things that they have to resolve and keep working on for long periods of time. And even Tuvok being blind would have been interesting to play that out for several episodes, where Tuvok is blind, maybe even for the rest of the series, or just for a period of time through several episodes. And didn't Tim Russ audition for the part of Geordie LaForge?
Yeah,
I believe so, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I thought it was interesting that here he gets to play a blind Starfleet officer, or for a small period of time. He could have played that in The Next Generation had LeVar Burton not gotten the part.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's an interesting thought, and this is something that Bruce, you and I, of course, talked a bit more about on Positively Trek when we talked about that interview with Brian Fuller, and I thought that was a really interesting discussion. And one of the things that came up in that discussion is these decisions get made for a reason, and we can sit here and say like, oh, that season would have been awesome, it would have been amazing, but maybe because of the way television was at the time, people weren't really doing serialized things like that outside of, soap operas and things like that. Maybe it would have bombed. Maybe it would have been awful and people would have tuned out 3 episodes in because they weren't following it or something, right? So the hardcore Star Trek fans, I think, would have loved it, but you can't cater just to them. So maybe the decision was the right one. We don't know, but I am glad that those ideas at least got salvaged into this episode. These episodes.
Or maybe it would have been so new and innovative that casual viewers would have gone, oh my, this is different for Trek. I haven't seen this before. But the thing is if a studio has a decision between taking a risk and playing it safe, they are going to play it safe every time, unfortunately. Which is why we get so much of the same stuff over and over and over again. And, oh, hey, there's nothing else new that we can do that's safe, so let's reboot something. And there isn't a whole lot of innovation going on. They don't take risks. Even now, they don't take risks because risks don't equal money.
Yeah, definitely.
And that is unfortunate because it's not about the money. It's about the creative effort. It's about, a story. And sometimes great stories don't necessarily bring in box office hit money, but who cares? They're still great stories. We still need great stories, please.
Yeah, I think this may have worked more in the creative favor if it would have been in syndication like Deep Space Nine was, and prior to that, The Next Generation, as opposed to being the flagship show of a new network called UPN,
Yeah.
So that adds a whole nother layer to things. And they probably were trying to be very conservative of not pushing the bar too high or too low or whatever. Just keep the status quo, do a Star Trek show. Don't get crazy, guys. Just do a regular Star Trek show.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is that in syndication, they often showed episodes out of order. So how would that have benefited them to have been automatically slotted for syndication? Because it would have been the same situation. They're not going to do something like Year of Hell for an entire season, because if the episodes are shown out of order, no one's going to understand the context for what's going on.
I think the point is just the there's less scrutiny, less network involvement kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, isn't that one of the conditions that Roddenberry had doing The Next Generation, that he didn't want to go to a network? And he was sold on the idea of doing a new Star Trek series because he wouldn't have to deal with a network like the original series when he was dealing with NBC. He wouldn't have to butt heads with them. He would just have to butt heads with the studio,
Yeah.
So.
Definitely.
Yeah, well, studios. Bunch of executives who have never done anything creative in their lives making all of these creative decisions, and it doesn't always go very well, if you know what I'm saying.
Yes, let me tell you about my job. No,
I was waiting for this. So we're getting towards the end of part 1, and we've kind of been jumping all over the place, but for the end of part 1, Voyager has been getting its butt kicked by the newly resurgent Krenim Imperium because of the changes in the timeline, but now they've perfected these temporal shields, and they've kind of thrown a wrench in the works, and the Krenim Imperium is now a pre-warp civilization, and Anorax goes and chases Voyager down and tries to erase them from history. Before he does that, he takes samples of the hull and samples of the life aboard. So he kidnaps Chakotay in Paris, and Voyager warps away, sacrificing much of her outer hull in the process. And Janeway orders the crew to abandon ship, keeping just the senior staff aboard Voyager. So that was, I remember that to be continued being quite a big deal. And the other thing I really remember from this is the visual effects, which for now, like, you know, are they're fine. But at the time, I remember, like, for example, that shot of Voyager streaking into warp and the hull starting to peel away. It's still a gorgeous shot, you know, more than 20 years later, which is pretty amazing. I think this is 1997 this came out. I remember just being absolutely blown away by the visual effects, and I think they hold up fairly well here.
Oh, I agree. I wasn't even thinking about, you know, oh, that effect was crappy. That never once came to my head during either part. The only thing that came to my head is, hey, that time ship kind of looks a bit like Babylon 5. But go look at a picture of the Babylon 5 space station and you'll see what I mean. Yeah, kind of see like the roundy bits there and there in the middle, you know, very Babylon 5.
I can see that for sure.
Wow. I didn't know you
even
had
the
that.
same colors. That is amazing. I didn't know you had that either.
I didn't even know they made that, but I mean, I'm not surprised either.
Whoa.
Oh, wow.
It's fine.
Gravity.
It's fine.
Restored. It's been destroyed. The timeline.
It's fine, folks.
Okay.
We're still in 2020.
I was hoping we were going to get a better version of this year when that thing hit the floor, but
Is that Eagle Moss ship? Is that
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, people in the comments. Oh no, it's fine. It's fine. It's totally okay. It's absolutely okay. Okay.
Look at that.
Yeah, Eagle Moss put that one out. I really like that one. The only thing it doesn't have like that big huge like crystal at the front, which I think that was a really cool element of that ship. But
yeah,
very cool.
You can make one.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's
true. Put a Kyber crystal into that.
Ooh, then it becomes
You're crossing the streams. Back away. Back away.
So getting into part 2 then, we get kind of a bit of a shifting of gears. Voyager now just has this very, very skeleton crew, the 7 crew members who are still aboard. And we also follow Chakotay and Paris on the weapons ship. I'm really curious what people think of Chakotay in this episode, because I remember being really disappointed by some of his actions and decisions. And the fact that I'll get into what I think then right away, because like this guy Anarax is literally standing there talking about wiping civilizations out of existence. And Chakotay is like, he's an enlightened man, a little misguided, but okay. Anyway, I don't know. That felt really weird to me that Chakotay kind of got so wrapped up in this. What do you guys think of that?
Well, I'll tell you what I think. I thought at first that Chakotay was just playing along.
That's what I thought.
And I think at first he actually was playing along. And then he got caught up in the possibilities, just like Anarax did. And doesn't understand that he is becoming as obsessed as Anarax. And he starts doing some dumb stuff. He starts saying some dumb stuff. And Paris is understandably outraged. And I'm like, yeah, I thought Chakotay was being smart and playing along, but this is not that. And I understand how that can happen. I understand how a charismatic person can draw you in and make you believe that what they're doing is right. We've seen it happen in real life many a time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's not until sometimes people never come out of that. Sometimes they stay in that place. But luckily, Chakotay did get to see the true Anarax and went, ooh, I've been doing that, huh? Ooh. And so, yeah, it all came from a place of just wanting Voyager to be whole again, wanting to be back with the crew. And this seemed the quickest way, the easiest way to do that. And so he fell into that trap, which is the same thing that Anorax did, really.
Mhm.
Except for him, I don't think it was very quick. I mean, it would take a while to, make all of these theories, build a ship, all of those things. And then once he had the ship, yeah, he could keep trying for as long as his little old heart desired. But yeah, Chakotay got sucked in, but he saw the light in eventually. I think it took a little too long. That's a little bit troubling.
Mhm.
Yeah. I agree. I felt the same way Brandi did. Yeah, it was just like I felt like Chakotay was just kind of going along with it and just playing him. If anything, maybe just trying to figure some things out by trying to act as if like, yeah, I'm on your side, just so he can gather information. But yeah, I think he got kind of sucked in. And knowing that this has already been taking place for 200 years, I also felt that Chakotay probably is trying to figure out, well, is there a way to correct this? Is there a way to restore all this back? So we can't just stop the guy. The damage has been done. Is there a way to repair the damage? And that's really what the guy is trying to do, but Chakotay is trying to repair it to what the original timeline is. So I was okay with it. If anything, I liked what they did with his character because it really helped us to sympathize, I feel, more with Anorex because we're seeing one of our heroes relating to him as opposed to being opposed to him the whole time. So it was like, well, if Chakotay feels that Anorex is okay, well, maybe there is something there. Maybe I should be considering that Anorex is an okay guy, or maybe he is doing the right thing. So I like that allowed us to maybe question that and maybe look at Anorex in a different light. Still, he was wrong, but at least it brings that up.
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
Yeah.
But I never saw him in a different light.
Yeah, me neither.
Well, I usually every morning I take about I have a prescription. I'm on 200 milligrams of Anorex, and I take it every morning. And time still continues.
No, that's
not a prescription like medicine.
that name is too pronounceable for modern day prescriptions. I'm sorry. It's got to have more X's and more Z's in it, and just that just isn't. That's too easy. Too easy.
No. I do like that the Chakotay storyline kind of highlighted the dangers of falling for something like that, like getting in your head about the ends and like justifying the means kind of thing. I know that's a little bit cliched, but in retrospect I kind of do like that it was one of our like perfect 24th century characters who kind of started to get swayed a little bit by that. It just, Chakotay of all people, it felt a little weird because it didn't seem like him. And like you said, Brandi, it just a little longer than I think he would have. But, it's still interesting that it causes us to kind of question these ideals and that kind of thing. And then realize that, no. Yeah, what he's doing is wrong. And this splash of water in the face makes me realize that kind of thing.
So do you think that would have worked better if it was Tom instead of Chakotay?
Oh, no.
Yeah, definitely not.
No, absolutely would not have worked better.
Yeah.
that would not work with Tom at all. No.
Yeah. Tom, I think, was perfectly played in
Yes.
this one, like perfectly written as to how his character would respond to things. Yeah, he would be the guy that's like inciting the crew to rebellion against this guy, which is kind of what he does. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep. Now, what if it were Harry? Because Harry would have had the motivation of like, well, if we can fix different timelines, maybe there'll be a timeline I am promoted. So let's just keep doing this.
No.
That wouldn't have done either. No.
Jokes aside, I could kind of see Harry getting in his head about this stuff and kind of following that same path that Chakotay does in this. I could see that. Like he can kind of be swayed a little bit and kind of, what's the phrase? Not see the forest for the trees, I guess. Sometimes. I don't know. But
if they had the balls to do this kind of stuff, it would have been great if there was like a major character or prominent character that had a close relationship with, let's say, Chakotay or whoever, that was killed in a previous episode, and now that crew member is wanting to see the timeline change because let's say Kes died and it was Neelix on that ship, and Neelix is like, yeah, I'm supporting this guy because maybe we'll get a timeline and Kes could be back. I would love to see that kind of motivation, because now he has an emotional connection just like Anorex does, and they're finding themselves in that same boat, and we got to steer our character back and say, no, it's wrong. He doesn't understand it, but you need to understand. And then that our character learns the lesson and tries to fix it for Anorex.
So kind of another argument for more consequences carrying through episodes.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely agree with that. So yeah, like we said, Tom kind of gets to know this Obrist guy and learns that the crew isn't all behind Anorax. They've kind of gotten weary of this 200-year mission and see him as obsessive and that sort of thing. So he kind of gets them on his side. Meanwhile, on Voyager, they're dealing with nebula gases getting into the ship and micrometeoroids, which doesn't make sense because they're not in a planetary atmosphere, but so they wouldn't be called meteoroids. But anyway, I think that's right. Somebody more scientifically minded can correct me if I'm wrong there, but I thought in order to be a meteor, no, that is right.
It's
Meteorite
meteorite.
is in
It's
the
just-
atmosphere. Meteoroid is outside. So never mind, they're fine.
Yep.
Sorry, I just had
Now,
that
I
whole
came to
argument
that
with
same-
my head.
I was like, yes, Dan, you're right. No, wait. No, the word's meteorite. That's what it is when it enters an atmosphere. So we came to the same conclusion at the same time. Well done, us.
There's a little sad insight into my thought processes that when I'm making non-live videos just gets cut right out. But yeah.
The beauty of editing.
Yeah. So I'm enjoying a lot of this stuff on Voyager, and Janeway comes to blows almost with the Doctor at one point where she's obviously pushing herself, and to the point of the Doctor relieving her of duty because on medical grounds, but she basically says, what are you going to do? We have no brig. The force fields aren't working. So unless you're going to shoot me, I'm not relinquishing command. So, yeah, what are we thinking of Janeway at this point and her decision-making and her capacity for decision-making, I guess?
Well, I felt like stay in the frickin' nebula until you've got your deflectors working. That was my personal feeling. It's like, why are you risking the ship and what's left of your crew for this when you have time? She doesn't like inaction. And that's what she felt was happening. She's got this driving need to fix things. And she doesn't like just standing still and making repairs. And I feel like the Doctor was justified in what he did. Not that it had any effect whatsoever, but, I was actually really impressed that he stood up to her like that and was not kowtowed by her in any way. Except he wasn't going to shoot her, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But
there's a question of practicality.
Yeah, but I just thought, I feel like the Doctor's right.
Mm-hmm.
In this instance, I feel like he was right.
Yeah, she's very stubborn, and she admits that,
Well, she is a Taurus. So
I hadn't even made that connection.
May 20th baby, she's right on the cusp there, but still a Taurus. So
yeah, but I love seeing her in this situation. That she's just going to just keep going and going. It doesn't matter if she's in pain, doesn't matter if she hasn't eaten, doesn't matter nothing. I mean, whatever. She's just going to go, and there's nothing stopping her. And I love that.
Doesn't matter if she hasn't had a shower in 3 months. It's fine.
Right.
It's gonna get stuff done.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm on Brandi's side here. Like she is making questionable decisions, and I agree with the Doctor. And all of that being true, at the same time, Voyager would not have survived had she not done the things she did too. So, like when she's in deflector control, for example, and exposes herself to the flames to get the deflectors back up. Voyager probably would have been destroyed there by the sounds of it. So
But would they have been in that situation if they had repaired things more while they were?
That's a very valid point as well. So
there's no way to know. There's no way to know for sure if things would have turned out the same way if they had just stayed a bit longer, gone out with their deflectors fully functional, etc. Just saying.
So what'd you guys think of the line though when she's going to crash the ship?
We'll get there for sure. Whoops. Darn it, the things moved. Okay, so TJ Zamboni Schwartz, I just wanted to jump back. Thank you for this. So meteorite is after it lands. Meteoroid is when it's in space, which is what they called them. So they got that right. Meteor is when it's burning up in the atmosphere. So awesome. And Patrick, I wanted to highlight as well. So the regulation the Doctor cites is the same one cited in the Doomsday Machine as needed grounds to relieve Commodore Decker. I love that consistency, that they don't just make up a new thing. Yeah, for sure. So, Brandi, did you? Yes.
There was something that we didn't talk about in part 1 that I really wanted to bring up. It has
please.
a wonderful reference to First Contact that is just so subtle that you almost miss it. And it's when 7 of 9 is getting Harry and B'Elanna out of what they were trapped in a turbo lift, right? I couldn't really tell where they were trapped, but it seems like they were trapped in a turbo lift. And they were playing that trivia game, and she couldn't remember the name of Zephram Cochrane's ship. And frankly, I couldn't either at the moment. I'm just like, I know this, but it's not, where is it? It's not coming out of my brain. And then she comes in and says it's the Phoenix. And they're looking at her like, how do you know that? The Borg were present at these events. And I'm like, what?
I know. That was nice. I know.
And they just move right on, and I'm like,
yeah. And the timing of that too, because this aired in 1997, and First Contact came out in November of 1996. So that was like a very timely reference too. I remember watching that on Voyager, and I was like, ooh, because I was always wondering, would there be some kind of mention of that or something like that? So that was always a fun little thing. Yeah.
Major reference in First Contact.
The
EMH trying to stop
absolutely.
the Borg so the people from sickbay can escape. I'm a doctor, not a doorstop.
Perhaps you'd like some sort of analgesic cream.
Well, I will say real quick, one of my favorite lines from the first one from the first episode is early on when the Doctor is talking about the crew becoming a family: Starfleet, Maquis, Klingon, Talaxian, Hologram, Borg, even Mr. Paris.
Yep. And
That's
Tom just
favorite.
like,
look on his face. Is just like,
I love that one.
I did
so
love that
great.
too.
Oh, that was great.
Yeah, very good.
All right. I derailed us, and I apologize, but I had to get that in.
No, by all means, that's good. Definitely didn't derail. That's all part of the broader conversation. I like it. In part 2, the next part we get, and this is a part I think that really shows the origins of this that I hadn't realized at the time, that like, oh, this was supposed to be a big long arc, not just 2 episodes, is in a captain's log we get Voyager has allied itself with the Nihedron and the Mawasi. We have 2 of their ships and 3 of their ships, and we're off to face off against the time ship. And it's kind of like, what? Who are these people? What's going on?
Right.
And like, that would have been an interesting little arc of episodes, is the coalition building, the trying to, get a group of people together to band against this weapon and that kind of thing. So that's where I was like, oh, this really feels like it's part of a broader arc. And now we're like, okay, we've got to get to the end game of this story quickly now. So how did you guys feel about that? Did you want to see more of like how that came about? Or, in the case of this episode, is it kind of like, okay, it's fine, I'm just going with it?
I was okay with it.
I was okay with it too. It did feel rushed, but considering what we were going through, I mean, we were jumping ahead weeks at a time, if not months. So it fit in with the narrative that they were telling, but at the same time, I'm like, I want to know what these people look like. Let me
Yeah.
see them, and we don't even get to see them, just their ships. And this is a moment I'm also going to bring up, another moment that absolutely wrecked me, and that was Janeway saying goodbye to Tuvok.
Yes, love that.
Yeah. That's a great moment too. I have a secondary Twitter account at daily_trek, and it's daily dose of Star Trek. Basically, I have quotes from episodes and stuff. And when I got to Year of Hell Part 2, that's the bit I used where Janeway's telling him, Voyager is, like he says, Voyager is just a collection of bulkheads and power relays and blah blah blah, and she says it's much more than that, and right now Voyager needs one of us. I love that whole bit. That's such a poignant part.
But it's also when she like touches his face and then she
Yeah.
hugs him, and then slowly you see his hand come up, and I'm just like,
Absolutely.
doing it right now. Doing it now. See? Can't help it.
It's a great moment. The relationship between those two characters I always really liked, and
Yeah.
wanted a bit more exploration of kind of that depth and backstory for sure.
Agree.
Yeah.
And then she's alone.
And then she's all alone commanding Voyager and commanding this small fleet against the weapon ship. So we, of course, get the big finale where Paris is transmitting the coordinates of the temporal core. And I think he's also supposed to be shutting it down at this point, but he can't quite do it. And Obrist on the bridge is still kind of maintaining his, I'm still loyal to the captain. And then he finally just says, like, I can't do this anymore, and shuts it down himself. I love that moment. Like, it's just,
Yes.
they fired the weapon, took out 2 ships, and he's like, I'm done. Like, I can't do this anymore. Obrist is an interesting character. It's not a ton of lines, but a big role in this episode.
Yeah.
Like, he's the one that turns off the temporal core and makes it possible for them to attack the weapon ship. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, well, he, like you said, he doesn't have a lot of lines, but everything he says is very important to the story.
Mhm.
Everything. So it gives us context, or it moves the plot along. So he is not wasted by any means. Everything he says matters.
Yes.
Everything he does matters too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Every time I see him, the actor who plays him was in One Life to Live, a soap opera my mom used to watch back in those days, and he played a guy named Cord. And I just remember, like, every time I see this episode, I'm like, it's Cord from One Life to Live.
Huh. That's funny.
Yeah.
I have no frame of reference for that.
Yeah, me neither.
I'm surprised I do, actually.
Of the 3 of us, I am too, actually. That's kind of
Oh, what? The woman is the one who watching soap operas? Mm-hmm.
No, not just that.
I'm
like,
joking.
I feel like I don't know. Bruce just seems the least likely to me to know anything about that, that's cool.
Yeah. Well, again,
Challenge
because
my expectations.
my mom was watching it a lot when I was younger, so I used to see it, and I'd sit there and watch some of it with her.
Nice. So yeah, now we're coming to that moment, of course, Bruce, that you alluded to and that I alluded to with my name that I've got up here. The action movie one-liner Janeway gets when she decides to ram Voyager into the weapon ship, hoping to create a temporal incursion and erase the ship from existence, thereby erasing the last year, basically, plus a lot more that doesn't get talked about, but is interesting to think about. So Bruce, what were you wanting to say about Janeway's wonderful
Well, it's just like
line
what you
here?
said, the action line, that every movie or something has to have that line in there. But even as cheesy as it can be, I think Kate Mulgrew did it very well, and I love it. I think she delivered well on it. So
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I'm kind of the opinion that I think Kate Mulgrew did as well as she could with that line. I think I don't know. I'm not a fan. This is not the first, or maybe it is the first, but it's not the last Janeway cheesy action movie one-liner. that we get. I think the episode Night at the start of season 5, when they're about to destroy the Malon garbage scow, just before they fire the torpedoes, she says, "Time to take out the garbage." Oh,
yeah.
To the point that I cannot wait for Garrett Wang and Robert Duncan McNeil to talk about these lines on the Delta Flyers.
Yes.
Like, oh man.
Bring
so
it
many
on.
times watching these episodes, I'm like, I can't wait till they get here.
Yeah.
Agree.
Yeah. Oh, and Patrick, about Days of Our Lives, I watched that later because when I was working at a company, they played it in the break room. And so I'd have lunch with everybody watching Days of Our Lives, which is funny because it was back in the 90s, and like 20 years later, I saw it. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's the same storylines and the same characters. It's been 20 years. I didn't miss anything.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
Welcome to Salem, wherever that was. Was it Salem, Massachusetts? Was it Salem, Oregon? We may never know, because they were both port towns, and that's where Days of Our Lives was set. Because my older sister watched it, and so did my grandmother, and so I did have exposure to it, which actually came in very handy once when I was watching an improv show where one of the improvisers just started making these offhand Days of Our Lives references. And I was the only person in the audience that was laughing my head off, but he kept going. Because if you get laughter from one person, that's enough. And he kept going that whole scene. He kept up the Days of Our Lives references.
That's
nice.
Fun.
It was magical. I laughed till I had an asthma attack.
So, Janeway times up and hits the ship. And as she had hoped, a temporal incursion starts within the ship. We get that slow motion fall of the lock of hair, and Anorax gets his kind of final moment of recognition that like the last piece of what he was trying to restore has been lost, and the ship disappears, is erased from history. And we get the pristine brand new Voyager. We get the official Voyager reset button hit firmly, and everything is back to normal. We get a few pithy references to years. It's like, oh, that was a very good year and all that stuff. So Voyager gets criticized a lot for the reset button. What do we think of what I think is kind of the most prominent example of it in this episode?
There was a reason for it this time.
This is true.
There was a reason for it. I mean, hey, shuttle blew up, but we've still got a full complement of shuttles. No explanation whatsoever. However, they blew up a time ship, causing a temporal incursion that actually erased the time ship and reset the timeline. Makes sense to me. It's the only reset button that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. Because I mean, if it didn't reset, then the episode wins. It just continues on. Anorex wins, and it just would never end. So I remember at the time when I first watched it, I was a little disappointed about the reset, but I felt like, it had to be done. But before, like, I guess what I'm saying is when I was watching the first part, I remember thinking, oh, this is getting good. It's being to be continued. Ooh, this is going to have repercussions in future episodes, I bet. And then when it reset, I'm like, oh, it's like it never even happened. Oh, well. But yeah. Oh, well.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the only way it could have ended.
Agree. It's, well, you're not going to end the show in the middle of season, well, in the beginning, really, the first third of season 4 by destroying Voyager. And that hurt me too. That hurt me. I knew it was all going to reset, but it still hurt me to watch that ship crash into. Just hard.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, especially since Troy wasn't flying it.
Oh.
You are just trying
just
to get a
gonna
rise out of me, and I am not even going to take the bait. So,
Well, I mentioned that because I realized I didn't listen to the last episode of the Star Trek Picard podcast, and so I was listening to it yesterday during lunch, and they had Patrick Stewart on, and he said, "Didn't Troy crashed the ship 2 times? It's like, oh my gosh, even he's talking about it.
No, she didn't crash the ship. She kept everyone from dying
I
as the ship
know.
crashed. Did her best to make sure that the crash wasn't fatal.
And the second time was under orders, let's not forget. So
Exactly. So there.
Yes.
yeah, I fear like somewhere Amy Nelson just went, what?
She's like, my ears are burning. Someone's insulting Troy.
Yeah. So it's interesting. One of the things you said there was if the episode doesn't reset, Anorax wins. The episode wins. But in the end, Anorax got everything he wanted, interestingly, because we do get that flashback to where apparently because the ship was erased from the timeline, he stops working on it or something. Basically, he spends more time with his wife, and maybe he's still kind of working on it, but his wife's alive, he's at the colony, and he's living that life again. So he doesn't know it, but he kind of got what he wanted in the end, which is interesting.
He did, but at the same time, there's still this thought of, yeah, but he was working on that project
Yes.
and then decided to go off with his wife. Who's to say he's not going to go back to that at some point? Or maybe he chooses a different path this time. Maybe he decides this is not worth, losing my wife. So maybe he just doesn't do anything with that again. They never go back to that region of space, so we don't know.
Yeah.
No, but if he does it again, it's just repeating the whole timeline all over again, and Voyager saves the day, and we're back at this again. It's just a loop.
Is
Yeah.
it, or does
Could
it
be.
happen differently because Voyager's no longer going through that area of space?
But remember, he's 200 years in the past now.
That's oh, that hurts my brain.
There's the timey-wimey.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's entirely possible. I like to think of it, and I mean, there's nothing in this episode that says that's the case, but I like to think of it as like a almost butterfly type effect type thing. Like he made that one decision on that one day to go take a walk with his wife instead of, and like maybe that was the day he went eureka and like whatever, and then that never happens now.
Yeah.
There's nothing in the episode to say that's what happens, but in my head, I like that's.
Yeah, let's
like
make that headcanon. It's good.
Yeah, I like
it.
I like to think that if you watch that scene and she's like, "Come with me," and he's like, "No," and then he changes his mind. He then decides to go with her. I like to think there's something that happened in the timeline where his future self, now that we're back in the past, there's something back there in the back of his mind that says, cherish the moments now and not worry about the work. Where in the past, he worried about the work more than his family, and the work ended up making him want to long and get his family back, So it's kind of weird.
And you can almost go like total metaphysical with it too, because there's that scene where he's talking about how time has moods, including rage and retribution and that sort of thing. So maybe time is now kind of whispering in his ear, don't do this. Spend time with your wife. It's a little bit woo-woo. I don't tend to go that direction, but like it would tie in nicely with some of the things he was saying earlier. Interesting thought.
Yeah, time is the fire in which we burn. Soren again.
Yeah, but there's also this, idea that the way we perceive time is not actually how time works. Like
That's
how the
true,
prophets perceive time. The wormhole aliens. There is no time. It's all at the same time, which is mind-blowing for our poor little human brains.
Yeah.
But that could explain why he would have this little thing in the back of his mind going, no, you should go spend time with your wife. Because all time can exist at the same time.
Yeah, it's like an echo of the previous loop through kind of thing or something.
Yeah, I can buy that.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to bring up that should be discussed?
You start to really see Tom's affection for B'Elanna in this episode when he's tending to her in their makeshift sick bay, and how different he is with her. Because I don't see those I haven't seen those interim episodes from about halfway through season 3 into this point, and so I haven't seen things develop. So, but I'm just like, ooh, this is different. And Tom is no longer being that creepy ladies man. So, which Robbie Duncan McNeil did not like at all.
No, he didn't.
And I agree.
Yeah, so their admission of love for each other was 3 episodes before this one, I think.
Oh, okay. So I missed a lot.
Yeah.
I keep forgetting you haven't seen these.
So yeah, we're definitely seeing that progression here for sure. One thing that I found really interesting, and this is one of those episodes that you kind of go back and revisit after you've seen it because it's one of the memorable ones, right? Like you're like, oh, I want to watch them. Oh, this is a good one. I forget kind of where in the timeline it takes place, and the fact that this is only 7 of 9's 8th episode, which kind of blows my mind. Like I forget how quickly she, helped design the new astrometrics lab and became a part of the crew. There's a little bit of that kind of tension in episode 2 where she's telling the captain, no, you're mistaken. You're wrong. We're not leaving the nebula tomorrow. And Tuvok kind of gives her a little dressing down for that behavior. But other than that, she's very much just kind of part of the crew. And I forget how quickly that happened.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I knew that she came on like at the end of season 3, and season 4 started with her acclimating. And so I'm like, wait, this is like episodes 8 and 9. That's fast. So, but speaking of 7 of 9 and Tuvok, when she catches him nicking himself shaving, and she gets very upset and has said, I've said to you multiple times that I can help you with your grooming, and he says, shaving is hardly a life-threatening activity or something to that regard. But I'm just thinking, it is not logical that he would want to shave himself and cause himself harm when there is someone willing to do it for him. It's a matter of pride.
Absolutely a matter of pride.
And he also, and 7 already feels beholden to him, and he does not like that. He does not like that feeling. I think that's evident. And so this is his one little rebellion and a source of pride for him to be able to do this. I was really sad, though, we didn't get to see some green blood.
Oh, yeah. Well,
yeah,
it's
I
funny
just
you
found
brought,
that very interesting.
I was just thinking about that scene. It's so funny that you brought it up. And one of the things about it is I had just got a new iPhone, and while I was rewatching this episode, I was setting up my iPhone, and that's because my previous iPhone, I've been having issues with it regardless. I've had it for years, but I dropped it and the screen looked just like Tuvok's mirror with all those cracks. I'm watching the episode. I'm like, oh my gosh, his mirror looks like my phone that I just replaced. Almost exact. All the same cracks. It was weird.
Yeah. Not that he needed the mirror, but that's where the sink was.
Right. He has to be where the sink is. Right. He wasn't using the mirror, but
yeah, for sure. Well, anything else that we haven't touched on yet?
Nope.
All right. So people in the comments, I guess, chime in with your rating for Year of Hell. And I guess we're out of final thoughts. So I should have called for that a little earlier. Maybe final ratings? Do you guys have a rating that you want to put forth for Year of Hell?
Yeah. I got to think of something pithy first, though. Give me a second. Okay, yeah, I've got something. It'll work. These 2 episodes were very hard for me because of the emotional state of my person. But also it was very good. it's hard to say I enjoyed these episodes because they are very hard and very dramatic, and there's so much crap that just keeps happening to our beloved crew over and over and over again that you start to feel as exhausted as they look. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a criticism. That is exactly what this episode, or these two episodes rather, are supposed to do. So, it's actually going to get 5 out of 5 unpromoted Harry Kims for me.
Oh, that's real too. Same way. I love these two episodes, and it was great rewatching them again. They're some of my favorite Voyager episodes and some of my favorite Star Trek episodes. So yes, that being said, obviously I'm giving it 5 out of 5 elixir of endurances that Neelix made for everybody.
But that sounded awful. Ration cubes. Well, yes, but mixed with water.
It's kind of like boiling a bouillon cube something, and then just drinking that. That's horrifying. I don't know if anyone's ever done that, but it's not good.
Ugh.
Need some relaxing spices in there,
I guess.
Yeah, I really enjoy these episodes. Like I said, these are kind of ones that I come back to every once in a while. I remember them really making an impression on me when I first watched them, thinking like, oh, wow, Star Trek can do this. That's pretty cool. It was pretty new for the time, even though they didn't do the full season thing like they were thinking. It was still pretty groundbreaking for Star Trek. So I have nothing but really good memories of this, other than like the initial kind of like reset at the end. But that's okay. It's kind of necessary. So I'm kind of with Lawrence Todd. You kind of stole my idea. My rating was a 98% restoration of my faith in Star Trek Voyager. So
Well done.
Definitely a highlight of the series, I think. So, whoops. Okay. So, we have a little bit of news, I guess, in that we haven't really come to a consensus as to whether this is what we're doing or not. But Bruce, you're unable to make it next week.
That is correct.
And we were thinking, like, do we want to take a week off? Do we want to come back next Friday? I wouldn't mind taking a week off, maybe, but I could be persuaded if Brandi, you and I want to do one together next week as well. That's fine as well.
Well, see, that's the thing. I'm good either way. So, we've proven that we can do just the two of us and still have a conversation, because you can make conversation with absolutely anyone. So, you could put a cat in my place and you'd still have a great episode.
I think you're selling yourself short as far as the what you bring to that being a good conversation.
Maybe, but if we put my cat in my place, it would be way more entertaining.
I'd rather have the cat with you. That would be fun.
The thing is, he does not come in the bedroom anymore because of that guy.
Oh.
He is terrified
really?
of Spock.
That's funny.
Yeah. He does not like Mr. Spock. Not one bit. He'll start to come in the bedroom and then he'll stop. He'll freeze and he'll look up at him. And then he's just like... And it's mind-boggling for him because he can't smell a person, but he can see this giant person looming. Yeah.
So I'd be game. Let's do it again next week, just the two of us. I'd be cool with that.
Okay, I'm good.
And hopefully it's not an episode that Bruce really, really, really likes and wants to do.
Okay, so
I said to my wife, I said it'll be something I really want to do.
Don't nominate anything that Bruce really, really likes. So Star Trek 5 and no, sorry. Sorry.
Oh man. So yeah, let's I'm going to say make sure that's not in the camera. I'm holding an Eagle Moss starship. The first person to guess which ship it is, you will be my pick for who can choose the first episode. So I will tell you, just to narrow it down a little bit, it is a Starfleet ship. So
that's good narrowing down. So.
Yeah, I figure that should be enough to get people to guess. So that's So we've got some guesses. The Reliant, nope, not the Reliant. And if it's, yeah, never mind. I'm not going to say anything. Okay. Discovery, no. Excelsior, no. Krenim Warship, definitely not.
That is 2 on the nose.
Yeah, that would have been good. Defiant, no. Akira class, no.
We might
We'll
be
get
here
to
a
it
while.
eventually.
I'm sure we will.
Oh, here we go. Paul Nyad, NX01.
Oh,
That-
yes!
Yeah.
That is
Yay.
correct. That is the one that I
Yes!
grabbed. So
I have one
Yes.
of those as well, and I love it. It makes me so happy.
So, Paul, you get the first choice as to which episode will be in the to poll to decide what we're watching next week.
Or movie.
Or
Or
film.
movie,
Yes. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Episode or movie.
Yes.
So, Brandi, if you're ready, you can
Okay,
go
sure.
ahead. And we'll give
Uh,
Bruce a turn as well, even though he's not going to be here. But
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. This is funny because you can't really tell, but the first person to correctly guess the color of my eyes will get the next choice. Dave is excluded because he knows.
Well, I hope so.
interesting.
Well, there's a limited amount of things that it can be. So
What color
you
are
know.
your eyes, Dan?
Mine are brown.
Brown. Mine are blue.
Mhm.
Oh, here come the guesses.
Oh, Chris Trek fan 702 guessed green, and that is correct.
Yeah.
Way to
Alright.
go, Tribs.
There you
Way
go.
to go.
Oh, and I did not notice. Sorry, Paul Nyad, Doomsday Machine. Is that your? That's your
I love
choice.
that
Excellent.
one.
Excellent.
Oh, I like that one.
Ooh. Ooh. I
Unless
have
that was a
thought-
really belated guess as to the Eagle Moss model, but that doesn't make sense.
I like Zambodi's guess on Brandy's eye color, data yellow.
No. Technically, if we're gonna get like really super technical about it, I have sectoral heterochromia, and so one eye looks more green than the other because of irregular splashes of gold in the other eye. So one eye actually looks more green and the other looks more hazel, but they are technically green.
Cool.
Technically green.
And we have a vote or a nomination of North Star. an
Enterprise episode, my
episode.
heart.
There you go.
Excellent.
Another one.
Season 3
Good
of
episode.
Enterprise. So that's cool.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Okay.
Good start.
So here we go. You guys have to guess this. I'm holding a graphic novel in my hand that I haven't read yet. It came out years ago, and I'm going to be reading it soon. And it focuses on a certain first officer. Who is that first officer?
I'm sorry, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at something Fabrizio said because
Wait, what did he say? Oh. What? Why? Is he talking
Okay.
about himself?
no,
Are we talking about this comment?
it was something that it was something that I said accidentally when we were talking about an episode on Warp 5. I was trying to say Stormfront Part 1 and I said Stormfront. And it's still funny.
I think we've all been there.
2 years later, it's still funny.
Wow. Well, we have a winner already. It was that quick.
Oh,
Lawrence Todd. Yes. Number one.
excellent.
Woot!
Number one.
I had a feeling it was that too. That's cool.
There we
Very
go.
nice. Very nice.
Lawrence Todd, number one. So Lawrence, I know you were angling to get a pick earlier as well. So
Oh God.
yes, you get to choose episode number 3 or movie, whichever.
I think I know already what he's going to pick. What he
Oh.
threatens to pick.
Uh-oh. Are we being set up here? I feel like we're being set up.
I want to know now. I want to know. I want to see what he comes up with. Hey, so the random number thing, if we're going to do that, I mean, Brandi can do it again, but since I have my new iPhone, it probably will work.
Oh, okay.
I haven't
Give it a
tried it.
second
though.
chance.
Actually, you know what?
Oh.
Maybe we shouldn't.
Okay, so Lawrence Todd says the animated series episode with the Kazinti, which I believe is the slaver weapon.
Yes, in fact,
right?
Tony does confirm it's the slaver weapon.
Excellent.
Wow.
Ooh, a TAS episode. Very cool.
I'm sorry. I saw someone say Sub Rosa, and I must have mixed them up with you, Lawrence. My apologies.
Awesome. Slaver weapon, much better than Sub Rosa.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so random choice.
I have not tried Siri on my new phone. I mean, I literally just got this like 4 hours ago. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I think because I'm used to having the button for Siri, this one I don't. So I'm just supposed to say, "Hey Siri, give me a number between 1 and 9."
A random number between 1 and 9 is 6.
6. So that's Enterprise.
Oh, okay.
Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Series, TNG. Yeah,
If you got
Enterprise.
TAS in there. Yeah, Enterprise.
Enterprise. Okay.
So 4 seasons.
4 seasons. Hey Siri, give me a random number between 1 and 4.
A random number between 1 and 4 is 4.
Ooh, that's
All
my
right.
favorite season.
We might be watching a trilogy if it's one of those.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah,
that's a good
we can't
point.
watch one episode of a trilogy.
So number of episodes in season 4 is 22.
Okay. Hey Siri, say the number 22.
No, God, no.
I didn't get that.
Spoiled.
Hey
So I
Siri.
just watched it, so I wouldn't have to watch it again.
Oh, you have to watch again. Hey Siri, give me a number between 1 and 22.
A random number between 1 and 22 is 4.
4. Okay, so that would be the Borderland Cold Station 12 Augments trilogy. Episode 4 is Borderland. So yeah.
Goody, I get to see Big Show as an Orion, holding up to Paul like a little dolly.
And Brent Spiner as yet another sung that's an acquired taste. So
Yeah. They all kind of look alike. It's so weird.
it's very strange.
Genetics.
All right, so I will definitely post that up as a to Paul on at Kertrats, KERTRATS. That's my Twitter account, and you can find that there shortly after we go off the off of being live. I didn't want to say off the air. Is that because we're not really on? I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway,
well, we're broadcasting.
Yeah.
It's a
Sure.
live broadcast, so
That
off the
works.
air.
So yeah, you can also find me and Bruce on our podcast Positively Trek, where we're at episode 16 now, so it's chugging along. We're doing pretty well. Looking to bring you some really cool stuff in the coming weeks, and of course Literary Treks, the Star Trek books and comics show on the Trek FM network. So Bruce, where can people find you when you're not on live here at Fridays at this time?
If I'm not here, you can find me on Twitter at Admiral_Rex. That's where you'll find me. Yeah.
Perfect. And
That's
Brandi?
That's it. Oh, and I'll be on the next Star Wars report next week.
Cool.
I'm on occasionally, so this next one I'm going to be on. And I know we have a guest. We have an author on of a new book that's coming out. Not a novel, but like a fun book, like, I don't know, about characters and things like that. Yeah. So yeah, check that out.
Awesome.
Fantastic. You can find me on Twitter at Brandi112. You can find me on the Edge main show on the Trek FM network, talking about Discovery with Liam and Nick. You can also find me on the Dark Corner podcast with my husband Dave, where we talk about stuff and things. There is swearing, and it's usually mostly from me. And you can hear me by myself on the Headcanon podcast, where I talk about whatever particular weird fandom or thing that's going on in my brain at the moment. There is a lot of rambling, a lot of tangents, and sometimes, I'll recount my weird dreams. Yes. And you can find both Dark Corner Podcast and Headcanon at darkcornerpodcast.com. unready.com or wherever you find your podcasts.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. This has been a lot of fun, and we'll see you next week. Well, me and Brandi will. So, talking about one of these episodes, I'm excited. So, we'll see you then. Have a great evening, and goodbye.
I won't see you.